I didn't know a Tuesday dinner would turn into the moment my whole marriage collapsed, and a dead woman's name came back to haunt our table. One second, I was cutting Emma's chicken into tiny pieces the way I always did, listening to her chatter about preschool stickers and the princess lunchbox she wanted. The next second, my 4-year-old daughter was choking so hard, her face went blotchy red, her eyes wide and terrified, her little hands clawing at her throat like she couldn't find air anywhere in the room. "Emma!" I dropped my fork, my chair screeching against the floor. My husband, William Hayes, froze for a fraction of a second. Then I saw it. Not on him. On his mother. My mother-in-law, Jennifer Blackwood Hayes, went white. Not the normal kind of panic a parent has when a child chokes. This was different. This was recognition. Her lips parted like she'd just watched a secret crawl out from under our couch and climb into Emma's throat. Jennifer lunged with shaking hands, but I was already behind Emma, pulling her small body against mine. I'd trained myself for pressure, years in military intelligence before I moved into cybersecurity. You learn to act while everyone else is still processing fear. 3 compressions. Emma coughed, sobbed, and sucked in air like it was the first breath of her life. But nothing came out. Something went down. Her crying turned thin and wet, like she was trying to swallow around a sharp truth lodged inside her. "What did you swallow, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice too calm for how violently my heart was slamming. Emma's words came out between tears. "It was pretty like a butterfly, the shiny one." I stared at Jennifer. We didn't own butterfly jewelry. Jennifer wouldn't meet my eyes. She stammered something about daycare, about kids bringing things home, about maybe it fell out of Emma's pocket. She was lying. And I knew it the same way I knew a lie in a briefing room. Her shoulders tightened. Her breath went shallow. Her hands kept rubbing her ring like she was trying to erase herself. I grabbed my keys. "We're going to the ER now." In the back seat, Emma whimpered against Jennifer's chest. And in the rearview mirror, I watched Jennifer's face. Terrified. Not for Emma, but for what the doctors were about to pull out of my daughter. Because whatever that pretty butterfly was, it wasn't just jewelry. It was evidence. And someone in my husband's family had been hiding it for 3 years. You want to know the part that still makes my skin crawl? The moment the hospital monitor lit up and the doctor saw the engraving, his voice started to shake, like he just realized my child had swallowed a missing woman's last trace. And that missing woman had a name. Michelle Turner. And my mother-in-law's father, real estate king William Blackwood, was about to do anything to keep that name buried. Before that night, before hospitals and police and a name none of us were supposed to say out loud, my life looked solid, predictable. Safe in the way people assume marriage automatically becomes after enough years. I was 35, a former military intelligence analyst who'd spent 8 years overseas learning how to read lies in Men Trained to Kill, and then traded battlefields for servers when I transitioned into cybersecurity consulting. I liked order. I liked systems. I liked knowing where the weak points were before they collapsed. Will Hayes, my husband, had always told people I was the calm one, the woman who never raised her voice, who planned 3 steps ahead, who didn't scare easily. We met 6 years earlier at a charity tech event hosted by his family. I remembered noticing him because he didn't try to impress anyone. He stood near the bar, awkward in his suit, smiling politely while his grandfather, William Blackwood, the man everyone whispered about, commanded the room like a general. Will wasn't like them, or at least that's what I told myself. He was kind in the beginning, attentive, almost shy. He asked real questions. He listened when I talked about work instead of pretending to understand. When I said I didn't want children right away, he nodded and said, "Whenever you're ready." That mattered to me. His family, though, they were something else. The Blackwoods didn't enter rooms. They claimed them. Jennifer, his mother, was always impeccably dressed, perfectly polite, and emotionally distant in a way that made you feel like you were being evaluated without ever being addressed. She smiled often, but her eyes rarely matched. Her father, William Blackwood, was the axis everything revolved around. Half the city's commercial real estate carried his name. Judges came to his Christmas parties. Councilmen laughed too hard at his jokes. When he spoke, people leaned in. I learned early that disagreeing with William wasn't done openly. At family dinners, conversations bent around him. When his son, Derek Blackwood, showed up drunk, which was often, everyone pretended not to notice. Derek was loud, volatile, and carried himself like consequences were theoretical things that happened to other people. Once, when Derek threw a glass across the patio during an argument, William only sighed and said, "He gets emotional." That was the word they used for violence. I didn't belong in that world, but Will insisted it didn't matter. "They're not us," he'd say. "We're different." And for a while, it felt true. We got married quietly. No spectacle. No political donors at the reception. I paid my share. He paid his. Emma was born 2 years later. Planned, wanted, loved. Motherhood softened me in ways I didn't expect. I became more patient, more forgiving, more willing to ignore small discomforts. Like Jennifer never asking to babysit. Like William never acknowledging Emma unless cameras were around. Like Derek disappearing for months and then showing up bruised and angry with no explanation. There were moments, tiny ones, when I sensed something off. A tension in conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Jennifer going quiet when I asked about Will's childhood. William studying me like I was an equation he hadn't solved yet. But I told myself what most women do when they want stability. Every family has shadows. I had no idea one of those shadows had a name, and that my daughter would be the one to drag it back into the light by swallowing it whole. Because that pretty butterfly didn't come from daycare. It came from a jewelry box Jennifer never let anyone open. And the past she thought was buried was about to rip straight through my marriage. Looking back, the warning signs had been there long before Emma choked at the dinner table. They just didn't scream. They whispered. In the months leading up to that night, something in our household had shifted. Not dramatically, not enough to justify a confrontation, but enough to keep my instincts restless. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. for no reason, my mind alert, scanning memories like data logs for anomalies I couldn't yet name. Jennifer started coming over more often, not to see Emma, to check things. She'd straighten picture frames that weren't crooked. She'd ask where certain boxes were stored. She'd linger near the hallway closet, the one with the locked drawer she always carried the key for. Once, when I asked what was inside, she smiled too quickly. "Old things," she said, "sentimental." I didn't push. At the same time, Will began withdrawing in small, almost unnoticeable ways. He stayed later at work. He answered questions with half sentences. When I talked about a new consulting contract, his attention drifted. Not bored, just absent. One night, after Emma fell asleep, I asked him directly, "Is something going on with your family?" He froze for a second too long before answering. "They're just intense," he said. "You know how they are." I did. That answer wasn't new. What was new was how defensive it felt, like he was guarding something fragile, something that couldn't survive light. Then there was Derek. He showed up unannounced one Saturday afternoon, reeking of alcohol and anger. He barely looked at Emma, barely acknowledged me. He paced our living room like a caged animal, ranting about money, about being disrespected, about how his father never trusted him enough. Jennifer followed him in minutes later, face tight with panic. She took him outside. When she came back in, her eyes were red, and she avoided mine completely. That night, I heard Will arguing with her on the phone after midnight. Not loud enough to make out words, loud enough to hear fear. The tone was unmistakable. It was the same tone I'd heard overseas, right before informants realized their handlers had lied to them. Still, I told myself I was projecting. I was trained to see danger everywhere. I'd learned to doubt my own instincts in domestic spaces, to believe that love meant trust, even when trust felt incomplete. Then there was the jewelry box. I noticed it by accident while cleaning under the couch weeks before Emma's accident. A small, velvet-lined box had slipped halfway out from beneath the side table in the guest room. I reached for it. Jennifer appeared in the doorway like she'd been summoned. "That's not for you," she said sharply. The look on her face stopped me cold. Not anger. Terror. She snatched the box, clutched it to her chest, and forced a laugh. "Family heirlooms," she said. "I just don't want them lost." I apologized. But the image stayed with me. The way her hands shook, the way she locked the drawer afterward, like she was sealing a confession inside. So when Emma said butterfly, something clicked into place with horrifying clarity. That wasn't a random object. It was something hidden, something forbidden, something meant never to be found. And as we drove to the hospital that night, watching Jennifer cradle Emma in the back seat while whispering reassurances she didn't believe herself, I finally stopped lying to myself. This wasn't family drama. This was damage control. And whatever the Blackwoods had buried years ago had just lodged itself inside my daughter's throat, forcing all of us to face it, whether they were ready or not. Memorial Hospital smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. The kind of place where time stretches thin and every sound feels too loud. Emma clung to my hand as nurses moved quickly around her, their voices calm in that practiced way meant to steady parents more than patients. I stayed focused. Breathe, observe, act. The ER doctor ordered an X-ray immediately. I stood beside the monitor while Jennifer hovered behind me, twisting her wedding band until the skin beneath it flushed red. When the image appeared, my stomach dropped. A small metallic object sat lodged in Emma's esophagus. Too clean, too defined to be plastic or foil. The doctor exhaled slowly. "We'll need to remove it with an endoscopy," he said. "Light sedation, routine, 30 minutes. Routine." Nothing felt routine. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Stephen Moore, silver-haired, steady-eyed, the kind of man who'd seen enough emergencies to remain calm under pressure. He explained the procedure again, careful and precise, then knelt in front of Emma. "You're going to take a nap," he told her gently, "and when you wake up, the thing that's bothering you will be gone." Emma sniffed. "Do I get stickers?" "All the stickers," I promised, forcing a smile. As they prepped her, Jennifer excused herself to take a phone call. Something in me tightened. I followed, quietly. She stood just outside the doors, her voice low and frantic. "Dad, it happened," she whispered. Emma swallowed it. "Yes, that one. They're doing the procedure now. It was in my jewelry box. She must have gotten into it. I don't know what to do." I stepped around the corner. "Who are you calling, Jennifer?" She nearly dropped her phone. "My father," she said too fast. "I was just giving him an update on Emma." I looked at her evenly. "Your father has never called to ask about Emma. Not once in 4 years. Try again." Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Before she could recover, a nurse appeared and gestured for us to follow. "You can observe the procedure from the monitor room if you'd like." We walked in silence. The screen flickered to life, showing the camera feed as Dr. Moore guided the scope gently down Emma's throat. The pink walls of her esophagus filled the screen, clinical and intimate all at once. "There it is," Dr. Moore said calmly. "Let me adjust the angle." The light shifted, and suddenly the object came fully into view. A delicate gold butterfly, tiny diamonds embedded in its wings. Jennifer gasped softly behind me. Dr. Moore froze. The camera lingered just long enough for the engraving on the back to catch the light. "To Michelle, forever yours." The room went silent. Dr. Moore's voice, when it came, wasn't steady anymore. "That shouldn't be possible." The feed cut off. Minutes later, Dr. Moore entered the consultation room, holding a small metal tray. The butterfly pendant rested in the center, like a confession that had finally given up. "Do either of you recognize this?" he asked. I picked it up. I'd never seen it before. When I looked at Jennifer, her hands were shaking so violently she had to clasp them together. Dr. Moore sighed and pulled out his phone. "There's something you need to see." He showed us a news article dated 3 years earlier. "Local teacher missing. Family offers reward." The photo beneath the headline showed a young woman with auburn hair, smiling softly. She was wearing the same butterfly pendant. Dr. Moore swallowed hard. "She was my neighbor," he said quietly. "Michelle Turner. I gave her that necklace for her birthday. Custom made, one of a kind." He looked at Jennifer. "This necklace was listed as missing evidence." Security arrived, then the police. Within minutes, Detective Mike Santos stepped into the room, sharp-eyed, exhausted, the look of a man who'd been carrying a dead-end case for far too long. He photographed the pendant from every angle, then turned to Jennifer. "Mrs. Blackwood Hayes," he said evenly. "Tell me how you came to possess Michelle Turner's necklace." Jennifer looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted you to know." I felt something go cold inside me. "Start talking," I said, because in that moment, watching my daughter sleep behind a hospital door while a missing woman's last possession sat between us, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a family secret. This was a crime, and my child had nearly paid for it with her life. Shock doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it's the eerie calm that settles over you when your mind decides panic would be inefficient. As Jennifer began to speak, her voice breaking, words tumbling out in fragments, I felt myself detach just enough to listen properly, to catalog, to remember. That instinct had saved my life more than once in the past, and now it took over again. "My father gave it to me," she whispered. 3 years ago. Right after Michelle disappeared. He told me to hide it, said it was critical no one ever found it. Detective Santos didn't interrupt. He let silence do the work. "You didn't question why your father had jewelry belonging to a missing woman?" he asked calmly. Jennifer's shoulders folded inward, like she was collapsing under her own skin. "I questioned everything," she said. "But you don't understand my family. When my father tells you to do something, you do it. There isn't a choice." Santos nodded once, then said words that sliced through the room. "Hiding evidence for 3 years makes you an accessory after the fact." Jennifer's head snapped up. "Accessory?" she echoed. "To what? Nobody said she was dead. My father said it was business. He said Michelle was paid to leave, that the necklace was left behind by mistake." Santos's expression didn't change. "Michelle didn't leave. Her car was found abandoned. Her bank accounts untouched. Her family never heard from her again. And now we know William Blackwood had her jewelry." The implication hung heavy. Jennifer broke down completely, burying her face in her hands. I watched her cry and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just clarity. This was bigger than betrayal, bigger than marriage. This was about a woman who never got to go home. I stepped forward. "Detective," I said evenly, "I need everything you have on Michelle Turner. Everything. Her connection to the Blackwood family. Every lead you couldn't pursue." Santos studied me carefully. "You were military intelligence," he said. 8 years. I nodded. "And now cybersecurity," he added. "I ran your name. I didn't deny it." Jennifer looked up, panic flaring through her tears. "Please," she said to me, "you can't go after my father. You don't know what he's capable of." I turned to her. "Then tell me how Michelle knew him." She hesitated, then whispered the truth. Michelle was Derek's girlfriend. The name landed like a blunt force. Derek Blackwood, my husband's older brother. The violent drunk. The man whose arrests never stuck. The one William had protected his entire life. Santos leaned forward. "They dated for about 6 months," he said. "Michelle taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary. Witnesses described the relationship as volatile." Jennifer nodded weakly. "My father hated her, said she was beneath us. Then one night, Derek showed up with a black eye, said Michelle left him." Her voice cracked. "A week later, my father gave me the necklace." The question came out of my mouth before I could stop it. "Did Derek kill her?" Jennifer shook her head frantically. "I don't know," she sobbed, "but my father has always cleaned up Derek's messes. Every mistake, every crime." The door burst open. 3 men in expensive suits strode in, voices sharp and authoritative. "This interview is over." Behind them stood William Blackwood himself, 72 years old. Perfect posture, Silver hair combed back like he'd stepped out of a boardroom instead of a hospital emergency wing. His eyes found Jennifer first, then me, then Detective Santos with unmistakable contempt. He spoke smoothly about harassment, about family emergencies, about how further communication would go through attorneys. Santos stood his ground. "We have evidence linking your family to a missing person." William smiled thinly. "Jewelry can come from anywhere. My granddaughter is a child who picks up shiny objects. This proves nothing." Then he turned to me. "I'm disappointed," he said. "Using a child's accident to create drama?" I met his gaze. "Someone needs to speak for Michelle Turner," I replied quietly, "since she can't." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, calculation, threat. He leaned closer. "Be careful," he warned. "You're playing a game you don't understand." "I learn fast," I said. He smiled, cold and certain. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was up against. A man who believed the system belonged to him, and a family willing to sacrifice anyone, daughter, granddaughter, or stranger, to keep his empire intact. The shock was gone. What replaced it was resolve. Because if they thought I would stay silent after my child nearly swallowed the truth, they had made a fatal miscalculation. The shift happened quietly, not with raised voices or slammed doors, but with lawyers. William Blackwood didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten openly. Power like his moved in polished sentences and stamped paperwork, in calm men who smiled while explaining how your life was about to be rearranged without your consent. Less than an hour after Emma was cleared medically, everything tightened. Santos insisted the butterfly pendant remained hospital evidence. William's attorneys countered immediately. No warrant, no seizure order, no proof it wasn't a child's possession. Legal words flew back and forth like blades wrapped in velvet. I watched, expression neutral, already mapping the pattern. This was the expected play. Delay, distract, drown the truth in procedure. Then came the real move. William leaned toward one of the lawyers and murmured something I couldn't hear. The lawyer turned to me. "Given your erratic behavior tonight," he said smoothly, "and your baseless accusations against a respected civic leader, we'll be filing for emergency custody for the child's well-being." My chest tightened, but my face didn't change. There it was. Separate the child, isolate the mother, control the narrative. Jennifer stood frozen beside her father, eyes wide with terror and something worse, obedience. She didn't defend me. She didn't argue. She just whispered, "Emma needs calm." I looked at her. "So do victims," I said. That didn't protect Michelle. Her face crumpled, but she stayed silent. 20 minutes later, I stood helplessly in the hospital corridor as Jennifer carried Emma away, surrounded by attorneys and private security. Emma looked over her shoulder at me, confused, her little fingers reaching out instinctively. "I'll see you soon," I promised. It nearly broke me to say it calmly. When the doors closed, Santos exhaled slowly. "They'll bury this," he said. "Blackwood has judges everywhere. That pendant will vanish. The case will stall." "Not if we move faster," I replied. He looked at me carefully. "You're suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" I nodded. "I know his systems. My firm consulted for Blackwood Properties 2 years ago. Network architecture, security protocols, vulnerabilities." "That sounds illegal," Santos said flatly. "I'm offering technical assistance to a police investigation," I replied. "Pro bono." He studied me for a long moment. "Off the books," he finally said. "There's a diner 2 blocks away. Meet me in an hour." The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried grease, one of those places that felt permanently stuck in the 1980s. I opened my laptop while Santos spread 3 years of files across the table like a deck of unfinished cards. Michelle Turner, 27, 3rd grade teacher at Riverside Elementary. Beloved, kind, no debts, no enemies, no reason to disappear. She dated Derek Blackwood for 7 months before she vanished. Santos showed me statements. Witnesses described Derek as controlling, intensely jealous. Michelle's best friend, Sarah Chen, said Michelle planned to break up with him. "She called Sarah the night before she disappeared," Santos said, crying, Derek showed up drunk and angry. That was the last confirmed contact. 3 days later, Sarah was in a car accident. Brake failure. She survived, but spent 2 months hospitalized and refused to talk about Michelle ever again. Intimidation. Classic. I leaned back slowly. Derek didn't do it himself, I said. Santos raised an eyebrow. He had an alibi, a charity gala, 300 witnesses, time-stamped photos from 8 p.m. to midnight. William Blackwood's fundraiser. At his hotel. I pulled up schematics. Owned by William, I said. So Derek maintains an alibi while someone else handles the problem. Santos exhaled. Speculation, he said. We need proof. Then we find it. Michelle's car had been found at a rest stop 40 miles out. Anonymous tip. 2 days after she vanished. Anonymous tips aren't anonymous when you know where to look. I accessed cellular tower data through a corporate liaison who owed me a favor. Legal gray area. Not illegal, just inconvenient. There, I said, turning the screen. The tip call came from a prepaid burner at 2:47 p.m. 30 minutes earlier, that same phone pinged near Blackwood Properties headquarters. Coincidence? Maybe. Except the phone had been purchased the morning after Michelle disappeared, 3 blocks from William's office. And in the following week, it pinged repeatedly near Derek's apartment. Santos stared. That's not proof. It's a pattern. I cross-referenced employee records I still had access to. 3 names surfaced. One matched every ping. Victor Lane, head of security for Blackwood Properties, 15 years. Former cop fired for excessive force. Santos went still. Lane trained me years ago, he said quietly. Mean man. Loyal men do terrible things for powerful people, I replied. So we talked to him, Santos said. He won't talk, I said calmly, but everyone breaks. Over the next 3 days, I watched Victor Lane's life. He lived alone, no family, few friends, a routine soaked in isolation and cheap beer. Perfect. On the 4th night, I made my move. With help from an old military contact, I entered his apartment silently and confronted him. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply told him what I knew and what would happen if he stayed quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice was empty. Derek had beaten Michelle during a fight, called his father in panic. William sent Lane. They disposed of her body at a remote Blackwood estate, an old property past the rest stop, unused for decades. Waited, submerged in a lake. Lane signed a confession. It wouldn't hold up in court. But truth doesn't need admissibility to matter. As I left his apartment, my hands shook for the first time since the hospital. Not from fear, from rage. Because Michelle didn't disappear. She was erased. And the men who did it thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. This was no longer about my marriage. This was about justice. And my daughter growing up in a world where monsters didn't get to hide behind family names. And I was just getting started. The night after Victor Lane confessed, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment, no longer our apartment, watching the city lights blink like distant signals I couldn't decode fast enough. My phone lay face down beside me. I hadn't heard Emma's voice in 2 days. That was the part William Blackwood understood best. You don't have to destroy a woman outright. You just separate her from what she loves most and let the silence do the work. By morning, the consequences arrived. Not violently, clinically. A courier delivered legal papers to my door. Emergency custody filing, temporary restraining order, allegations of instability, trespassing, criminal behavior, a request for supervised visitation pending investigation. I read every line slowly, calmly, the way I read threat assessments overseas. They weren't trying to prove I was dangerous. They were trying to make me look dangerous. I called Detective Santos. They're moving the body, he said without preamble. Tonight. You spooked them. I closed my eyes. The Blackwood estate, the lake, the sonar reading, all of it was about to vanish. If Michelle's remains disappeared again, everything Lane said would become just another story, the powerful dismissed as lies told by desperate people. Ryan came over an hour later. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He just sat across from me at the kitchen table, coffee untouched. They'll dredge the lake, he said, or move her somewhere we'll never find. I know, I replied. My voice sounded flat, even to me. That scared me more than fear would have, because numbness meant I was at my limit. By nightfall, we were on the estate. No warrant, no badge, no protection, just truth, and a clock running out. The property felt wrong the moment we crossed the tree line. 70 acres of neglected land, a decaying mansion squatting at the center, like something that had been waiting patiently to be forgotten. The lake was black and still. We worked quietly, methodically. When the sonar finally registered something heavy below the surface, my breath caught. There, I whispered. 15 feet down. 32 feet from shore. Michelle Turner. 3 years underwater. We had the coordinates. We were about to leave, about to take it to Santos, to do this the right way, when flashlights erupted around us. Private security, Blackwood's men, weapons drawn. Ryan and I raised our hands. They marched us through the woods to a clearing where black SUVs waited. William Blackwood stood beside one, perfectly dressed, flanked by Derek and a wall of lawyers. He looked satisfied. Breaking and entering, William said mildly. Trespassing, serious charges. Homicide is more serious, I replied. Michelle Turner is in that lake. William smiled. Or it's a fallen tree, he said, or debris. Without a warrant, you have nothing. Derek stepped forward, eyes dark, jaw tight. Let me handle her, he snarled. No, William snapped sharply. We do this legally. He turned back to me. I warned you, he said. Now you've lost. He wasn't bluffing. As security confiscated our equipment, William leaned in. My lawyers are filing for permanent custody, he said softly. A judge will agree your daughter needs protection from you. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, silently. The kind of fracture that doesn't heal the same way twice. As they escorted us off the property, Ryan whispered, "They'll move her tonight." I nodded. Without a body, we had nothing. Without Emma, I had nothing. Back in my car, hands locked on the steering wheel, I finally let myself feel it. The loneliness, the weight, the knowledge that I had gone too far to turn back and still wasn't far enough to win. I wasn't just fighting William Blackwood. I was fighting a system designed to protect men like him. And for the first time since this began, I didn't know if justice was possible. I stared at the dark road ahead and whispered a truth I hadn't allowed myself before. I might lose. My daughter, my career, my name. Michelle Turner deserved justice, but I was starting to understand the cost of trying to deliver it. And the cost was everything. The question was no longer whether I was willing to pay it. It was whether I could survive what came after. The moment I accepted that I might lose everything was the moment the fear loosened its grip. There's a strange clarity that comes when you stop bargaining with outcomes, when you understand that playing safe is no longer an option, because safety is already gone. I went home after the estate confrontation and didn't sleep. Again. But this time, I didn't sit frozen. I worked. I turned my apartment into a command center, the way I used to overseas. Multiple laptops, encrypted drives, handwritten timelines taped to the wall. Michelle Turner's face stared back at me from a printed photo, her smile soft and unguarded. I won't let them erase you again, I said out loud. Ryan arrived before dawn with food I didn't touch. Detective Santos joined us later, off-duty, suspended, exhausted, but still in the fight. They're crushing Derek's confession, Santos said quietly. Blackwood's lawyers are already drafting motions claiming coercion. I expected that, I replied. Santos looked at me sharply. You sound like you planned for it. I did, I said, because men like William Blackwood don't collapse from one hit. They collapse when every pillar holding them up fails at once. I pulled up my main screen. Financial transfers, shell companies, bribes disguised as consulting fees, private security contracts masking intimidation payouts, emails, voice recordings, metadata trails. Ryan stared. This is a lot. It's everything, I said. William's power isn't just money, it's fear, silence, complicity, and every one of those systems leaves fingerprints. Santos frowned. If you release this, you risk the entire legal case. I nodded. I know. So why do it? I looked at the photo of Emma taped beside Michelle's. Because if we wait for a system he owns to save us, I said, my daughter grows up learning that justice is optional for the powerful. Silence filled the room. Then Santos asked the question he didn't want the answer to. What's your plan? I inhaled slowly. We don't leak this, I said. We detonate it, I explained calmly. Not one reporter. All of them. Not whispers. Documents. Not rumors. Timelines that corroborated Derek's confession, Lane's statement, the burner phone, the estate, the lake. Daylight. Relentless daylight. Ryan shook his head slowly. This is going to burn everything. Yes, I said, including me. Santos leaned back, rubbing his face. As a cop, I shouldn't say this. I met his eyes. But as a human being? I asked. He looked at Michelle's photo. Do it. At exactly 7:55 p.m. on Sunday, I hovered over the key. 200 journalists, major outlets, independent investigators, advocacy groups. 5 minutes before prime time. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. William Blackwood's voice slid through the line like ice. You think you've won, he said. You haven't. Derek will recant. Judges will stall. I'll destroy your career, your reputation, your access to Emma. When I'm done, she won't even remember who you are. I listened without interrupting. Then I said very calmly, you already lost the moment you underestimated how much truth one woman could carry. He laughed softly. You're not special. No, I said, but the evidence is. I hung up. At 8 p.m. exactly, I pressed send. The files went live. Within 10 minutes, headlines exploded across screens. Real estate tycoon tied to missing teacher cover-up confession details. Years-long obstruction. Blackwood family empire under investigation. My phone vibrated nonstop. I didn't answer. At 9:47 p.m., William appeared on television, flanked by lawyers, denying everything. But the questions didn't stop. And for the first time, his smile faltered. By midnight, the state attorney general announced a special investigation. The FBI confirmed involvement. Judges resigned. Politicians distanced themselves. The walls William built to protect himself began collapsing, loudly, publicly, irreversibly. I sat back, exhausted, trembling. Not from fear this time, but from release. For the first time since Emma choked on that butterfly, I felt something shift. Not hope. Certainty. Michelle Turner wasn't going to be buried again, and neither was the truth. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It cascaded. Slow at first, then violently fast. By Monday morning, William Blackwood's name was everywhere. Not the polished philanthropy pieces he'd curated for decades, but timelines, screenshots, audio snippets, court filings annotated by reporters who no longer needed permission to ask hard questions. And most importantly, a body was finally recovered. Divers pulled Michelle Turner from the lake at the Blackwood estate 3 days after the release. Exactly where Derek said she would be. Weighted, hidden, forgotten by everyone except the men who put her there. Dental records confirmed her identity. 3 years after she disappeared, Michelle finally came home. The legal dam broke immediately. Derek was arrested first. He tried to recant his confession within hours, claimed coercion, claimed lies, claimed manipulation. But it didn't matter anymore. The physical evidence matched his details too precisely. The cinder blocks, the bindings, the chemical residue Victor Lane had described. Truth doesn't need consistency when reality confirms it. William was arrested 2 days later. Accessory to homicide, obstruction, conspiracy. The man who once owned half the city was suddenly just another defendant in an orange jumpsuit, his name stripped of reverence and reduced to case numbers and charges. Watching his arraignment on the news, I felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction, just a quiet finality. The empire he'd built on fear collapsed under the weight of daylight. Judges he'd bribed resigned. One was indicted. A state senator stepped down. Blackwood Properties' stock plummeted. Contracts evaporated overnight. And the family that once moved as a single, obedient unit fractured beyond repair. Jennifer came to see me a week later. She looked smaller somehow. No makeup, no polish, no practiced composure. I didn't know how to stop him, she said quietly. My father. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I know, I said, but you still chose silence. She nodded, tears sliding down her face. I'll cooperate, she whispered, with everything. She did. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it mattered. We agreed to separate. Not angrily. Honestly. Our marriage couldn't survive the truth we'd unearthed together. Trust doesn't regrow in soil poisoned by fear. Emma came back to me 2 weeks later. The judge ruled against permanent custody for Jennifer's family once the full scope of William's crimes came out. Emergency filings dissolved under scrutiny. The narrative they'd built about me collapsed when the truth took center stage. When Emma ran into my arms in the courthouse hallway, I had to turn my face away so she wouldn't see me cry. You came back, she said simply. I always will, I told her. And I meant it. The public didn't crown me a hero. They didn't need to. Some called me reckless. Others called me brave. A few called me dangerous. I didn't correct any of them because the truth was simpler. I was a mother who refused to let her daughter grow up learning that powerful men get to rewrite reality. Derek was convicted of second-degree homicide. William received a 25-year sentence. At 72, it was a life sentence. Victor Lane was extradited and convicted. Michelle Turner's family finally had answers. Not closure, because that's a lie we tell ourselves, but justice. And that mattered. One evening, months later, I sat on a park bench while Emma ate ice cream beside me, her legs swinging freely. The city felt different now, not safer, just more honest. Ryan texted me about another case, another powerful man hiding behind money and silence. I looked at Emma, at the sunset, at the quiet space where fear used to live. And for the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to breathe. Because the truth had done what it always does when it's finally given air. It survived. And so did we. Healing doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, like the moment you realize your shoulders aren't clenched anymore, or that you can walk into your own kitchen without feeling watched. 2 months after the trial ended, Emma and I moved into a smaller place near the park. Nothing fancy. Sunlight in the mornings, a creaky floorboard she liked to jump on just to hear it squeak. She slept through the night again. So did I. Some evenings, after she fell asleep, I'd sit on the couch and let the silence exist without trying to fill it. For years, my life had been about vigilance, anticipating threats, reading people, preparing for the worst. Now I was learning something harder, how to rest without guilt. People asked me if it was worth it, the career risk, the marriage, the way I burned bridges I could never rebuild. They expected a dramatic answer. I always gave them the same one. I didn't do it to be brave. I did it because the alternative was teaching my daughter that silence is safer than truth. Michelle Turner's name is spoken now, at her school, in her family's home, in court records that can't be erased or buried again. She isn't a mystery anymore. She's a person who mattered. Emma doesn't know all the details, and she won't, not yet. But she knows this. When something is wrong, we speak up. When someone is afraid, we protect them. When the truth is heavy, we carry it together. One afternoon in the park, she asked me what I was thinking. The future, I said honestly. She smiled, sticky with ice cream. Is it good? I looked at her, strong, curious, alive, and felt something settle into place. Yes, I said, it is. Somewhere across the city, powerful men sat in cells they never believed they'd see. Their money couldn't buy silence anymore. Their names no longer bent the world around them. And me? I didn't win by being louder. I won by being steadier, by refusing to look away, by choosing truth, even when it cost me everything else. Because in the end, justice didn't come from a perfect system. It came from one woman who decided that fear would not be the legacy she passed on. And that lesson? That's the one I hope you carry with you too.